Our next speaker is Konstantin Zenkin. He is a professor of the Moscow Piotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky Conservatory, and he will be talking about music, number, word, the history and theory of connections. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. There is no doubt that music is an independent and self-sufficient world that cannot be reduced to anything else. But in the world, everything is interconnected, and each phenomenon has akin to itself and adjacent phenomena. Since in order to define a phenomenon, one, as it is known, needs to transcend its limits and see it within a wider system, then undoubtedly it makes sense to consider what is most closely related to music. I will refer to two phenomena correlated not by artistic criteria, but by the circumstances evidenced by the very substance of music, its, so to speak, structure, its material. One of them is number and the world of numbers. The other is word and verbal expression. Both number and word, as well as music, represent non-iconic sign systems. Word is an element of a verbal language. Number is an element of a conventional specialized sign system. In conjunction, it is number and word that bear the most important data about the world, which no other means can replace. Music is related to the world of numbers by its structure. The ratios of pitches and rhythms are nothing more than numeric ratios expressed through sound. It would not be an exaggeration to say that number is the material of music, almost to the same extent as word is the material of literature. Almost, because musicians apply numbers in most cases unintentionally. But because of that, numbers, of course, do not cease to be numbers. And sound expression relates music to word and verbal language with inextricable bonds. The purpose of the paper is to analyze the link between the structural, numeric, and verbal expressive aspects of music, which in conjunction determine its meaning. Thus, it is ultimately about approach to comprehending the meaning of music. Mathematical elements of music were naturally reflected in the musical texts. So, chord structures had various forms of numeric denominations, of which the figured bass of the Baroque era is historically most significant. Numeric designations have been used in various tablatures, from ancient organ and lute ones to modern guitar tablatures, as well as in jazz notation. Number as an element of the musical text appears at the time signatures. Moreover, the staff notation itself is a mathematical structure, a graph, where the abscissa is time, the ordinata speech. All of the above concerns only notation, but number is hidden in sound matter, in musical texture itself, is intrinsic to it. Its presence is associated with the indication of quantity, relationship, structure, in accordance with which number appears in different ways in arithmetic, algebra, geometry, higher mathematics. And if in musical texts number appears primarily in the form of a graph with auxiliary arithmetic denominations, then in the sound matter, we deal with special musical numbers, a term by Alexei Losev, which can rather remind of relationships, geometric figures and bodies. However, for music is especially important the specificity of number, which allows it to transfer with other precision the information about quantity, relationships, and structure, while being free from certainty of the conceptual subject sphere, from which no other art is liberated, in some respects, with the exception of architecture. The use of numeric symbolism in music also has a long history. But here we deal not with musical number, but with a purely arithmetic one, which function is close to that of a verbal program, namely to identify some extra musical meaning. During the classical Romantic era, the numeric basis of music was mentioned rarely, but each time by the greatest thinkers of the epoch. It is noteworthy then that they, as a rule, were not musicians, but sought to comprehend the essence of music in all its profoundness. Well-known examples are in the treatises by Leibniz and Novalis, Russian writer, romantic writer Odoevsky, Debussy, and follower of Debussy, Igor Stravinsky. Stravinsky writes, "The musical form is much closer to mathematics than to literature, perhaps not to mathematics itself, but to something certainly similar to mathematical thinking and mathematical relationships." End of quotation. It is not surprising that in the 20th century, when the previously dominant verbal speech paradigm of music and rhetoric paradigm has been significantly shaken, the interest in its numeric nature, including the Pythagorean Platonic harmony of the spheres, inaudible world music, enhanced again. We can notice it at least on the example of Paul Hindemith or Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's Earl. Actually, even Arnold Schoenberg's dodecaphonic technique could already give rise to the above statement by Stravinsky. But the further course of the history of music, the innovations of the second half of the 20th century, significantly intensified the composer's inclination to mathematical methods, such as the combinatorics of total serialism, stochastic music, probabilistic models, finally, computer modeling of sound and composition, and spectral technique. Music has long been related to word, as well as with human gesture, dance, movement. The expressiveness of vocal dance from a song to an opera is connected with the simultaneous impact of music and words. There is always word in the musical text, primarily as the title of a piece. The most common case is the designation of a genre, which from long ago bore information about the purpose of the work, and therefore in the most general terms about its meaning. Later, the marks indicating tempo and character were added to the titles, and in many cases, they bore a specific program as their musical meaning. But now we, as in the case of number, are interested not so much in the actual presence of word in a musical composition as in a special issue. By the way, it historically originated in the situation of verbal musical synthesis, music as word, the expression in music of something certain enough related to word. The presence of word in music can be detected at various levels. First of all, at the level of the tiniest semantic unit, an intonation, a motive, which can be associated with a certain object, concept, character, and then it turns into a leitmotif. Further, at the syntactic level, musical phrases and sentences in styles from Baroque to later Romanticism and Neoclassicism are arranged with an explicit regard to speech syntax. It is no coincidence that musical theory borrowed the terms phrase, sentence, and to some extent intonation from phonetics. Finally, at the compositional level, a piece can be more or less narrative. In such cases, the form is likened to a verbal narration of certain events. It is interesting to know that the narrative quality can be manifested in music even without a definite program. When it is obvious that there is a narration of some events, but it is unknown what exactly these events are. Chopin's ballads make a good examples of later. The convergence of music with verbal speech at all three indicate levels was realized due to rhetoric, which continuously influenced European music of new time, almost from the very beginning of its existence in ancient Greece. Since music accompanied word, the rules of rhetoric were naturally applied to both the verbal and the musical sequence at the same time. But instrumental music, free from verbal text, with undergone significant development in the Baroque era, was also arranged taking into account the rules of rhetoric. Thereby, its similarity to the art of literature was recognized. At the level of individual words and concepts, the similarity was manifested through the rhetorical figures at the level of compositions, in adherence to the rules of rhetoric disposition. The concept of ready word applied by Alexander Mikhailov to the verbal texts created in the era of the bloom of rhetoric culture transgresses the limits of literature, and it is quite suitable to music. Numerous musical rhetorical treatises have for a long time actually been manuals on composition. The rhetorical treatment of music as a language with more or less definite extra-musical semantics was supplemented by the theory of affects, which made it possible to consider music as a language of feelings. But even when the regulatory framework of rhetoric and the theory of affections became a thing of the past at the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th century, the verbal quality of music did not disappear. On the contrary, it was the romantic 19th century that constituted the climax of the history of perceiving music as a metaphor for words by Lévi-Strauss. The music was focused on poetry. Schumann's desire to express in his song the idea of a poem almost literary is well known. The spoken word, the literary program. Wagner and then Liszt, in their theoretical treatises, trace the history of the consistent convergence of music and literature in order to achieve their deepest synthesis in the future. As it is known, the harbinger of such a synthesis, Wagner considered the use of verbal text by Beethoven in the final of the Ninth Symphony, the example which largely determined the development of romantic and post-romantic symphonies, regardless of in what way, explicitly or implicitly, word was present in it. The mention naturally led to the emergence of scholarly disciplines related to the study of the musical meanings, musical hermeneutics, and musical semiotics. Their development took place already in the 20th century, even in the 19th century, hermeneutics, when on the whole, their correlation of music and verbal language in the old classical romantic sense became outdated. And it is possible to say that one of the main merits of the named disciplines in the historical perspective is precisely in demonstrating their own irreparable insufficiency for comprehending the musical meaning. Russian philosopher of the 20th century, Alexei Losev, in the work Music as a Subject of Logic, synthesized ancient philosophy, Pythagore, Plato, Neoplatonism, and phenomenology, Husserl, and practically created a new foundation for questioning the essence of music. The Pythagorean Platonic concepts of music as the numeric entity were significantly remodeled by the adoption of the ideas of the 19th century philosophy, the Romanticists, Schopenhauer, Wagner. For Wagner, music was equal to the emotional formation and life. One would think he was far away from its numeric structure. However, Losev, as his adherer, understood this spontaneous musical establishment as the numeric formation, numeric becoming. He used the mathematical theory of sets by Cantor and compared its aspect, in particular the abstraction of actual infinity and transfinite numbers, to numbers in music numbers, and their becoming. Wagner thought that music by itself, unfertilized by word, is unable to generate its own form. Supposedly, this form should be provided by word. Losev found this structure and force inside the music and called it the semantic figurality of number. From the perspective of the numeric structural properties of all musical elements, Losev focuses on the following correlation between number and music. Numbers, as well as music, provide insight into the structure and relationships in the context of non-objectivity. Just as for mathematics, it does not matter what exactly is being calculated with the mathematical formula. So absolute music is indifferent towards what causes any given sound in our reality, or vice versa, to which real world phenomena corresponds a particular piece of music. According to Losev, number is musical eidos. What does this thesis imply? First of all, eidos is a concept attributed to Plato and his followers, updated by Husserl, and it means the ideal model of thing. Supposing that the model of music is not a specific image, an image of particular emotion, but a number, then as part of Losev philosophy, it means the following. The first, music does not simply speak in terms of numbers, but it uses abstract structures that make up the foundation of all things and ideas in the world. The things and ideas themselves might not be involved and remain interpenetrated, merged, or in the meonological state from the ancient Greek meon, nothing, not this, meaning something indefinite. The second, moreover, not only potential things and ideas, but also the number is being become. The latter, in synthesis with becoming, produces time. Practically speaking, all time structures of music are identical to the numeric ones. However, they are set in motion, sort of being alive and living, able to think and feel. The third, becoming of numeric structures, their life and time, is expressed in sound. In such a way, number becomes word. However, still just an intermusical word one. The fourth, musical meaning, similarly to mathematical meanings, exists outside of object conceptual certainty, as if above it. According to Losev adherent Mikhailov, musical meaning is oriented only toward itself, towards that kind which locks and engraves itself inside own flesh and is not subject to verbal narration, paraphrasing. End of quote. The fifth, object conceptual abstractiveness can only enhance artistry, creative thinking, imagination. It is the main peculiarity of music, musical number and musical word, from the point of view of formal logic and inaccurate towards the precise information. However, such informational uncertainty, semantic potentiality, makes up the essence of music and art in general, including the mechanism of self-expanding information. The term belongs to Yuri Lotman. Losev, being fully aware that it is impossible to narrate music in words, nevertheless, did not reject the importance of verbal characteristics of musical pieces. Now, it is essential to understand the status of such verbal descriptions of music. The essence of music can include its own uninterpretable intermusical word that expresses the becoming of numeric structure in time. However, the essence of any type receives its own title and name. Essence cannot be expressed, and it sorry. Yes, and it got its name. The name is the essence in the other. Now Losev follows the medieval Byzantine philosophy. Name glorifies and Saint Gregory Palamas. The main thesis of his philosophy, relevant for the modern humanities and necessary in the consent to this problem, can be mentioned here. A name is not equal to a tag assigned by someone to some kind of substance and detached from the essence it refers to. The essence manifests itself in a name. A name provides an alternative demonstration of essence, as well as within the scope of human perception. At the same time, name never equals to the essence itself, always remaining its shadow. Yet, the word shadow I use only to make the hierarchy of essence and name clearer. By contrast, Losev, like St. Gregory Palamas, used to teach about the energy of name, not in passive shadow nature. For this medieval philosopher contemplating about the name of God, name is a manifestation of the semantic energy of essence. In other words, it is the lever of essence to influence the rest of the world. Losev, following Schelling and Wagner, calls a myth the most complete manifestations of essence. If characteristics are given in the metaphorical form, then it is possible to approach such all-encompassing mythological designation. Scientific, conceptual, analytical thinking does not advance us towards the comprehensive artistic answers, but only highlights any given regularities. Now I attempt to find out the aspects of Losev music philosophy that could be relevant for the future. Musicology and music theory. First of all, the understanding of music as becoming of number in time, and just as important, the expression of this numeric becoming. A whole scope of things prominent today, such as logical derivation and new categories of music theories, of Losev, brightness, color qualities, density, weight of sound, were not considered in this paper because they do not have a direct application to the problem of music and number. The following statements made by Losev are of drastic significance for understanding the nature and status of musical meaning. The first, musical meaning with number at the core is structurally accurate, however, does not aim for conceptual and objective clarity. The second, becoming of a number, musical meaning objectively exists only in movement, process. In other words, inside its numeric structure, there is always a substantial space left for uncertainty, counting probability, chance, potentiality. The third, musical becoming is versatile. It implies a practical, including physical existence in time, variation of emotional and semantic ranges, and most importantly, potentiality of the rise of meaning in different contexts, starting with differences in performance interpretations to reconsideration through the lens of new historic epochs. The fourth, being conspicuous. Musical meaning stands far away from the definiteness of word, but music word, likewise number, bears a certain function in the structure of the whole, and as a result, acquires a structural sort of numeric defiance. To conclude, we can say that music is a fundamental and consistent empire of ambiguity, which every time has to restate itself in the utmost certainty. Since it touches upon certainty and meaningfulness of a delineated numeric becoming, then in more habitual terms for musician, it can be said that the only ultimate definiteness of music and its maximum precision lie in the form and meaning being expressed to the utmost, that is being made more specific in every single performance, here and now. By words of well-known Russian scholar Mikhail Bakhtin, the world is not given. The world is specified. It is in progress. Music is the most adequate phenomena which reflects this status of the world, and it does it in the most strict formulas. Thank you for your attention.